America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, president of the Job Creators Network Foundation.
And I'm Alfredo Ortiz, president and CEO of Job Creators Network.
And you can subscribe to the show at salemnpodcast.com or anywhere you get your podcasts from. Today, we're going to be joined by Carlos Gazitua. He is the CEO of Sergio's Restaurants in South Florida, and he's going to tell us his story of successfully running a restaurant, an industry that has a lot of headwinds heading against them with all of the pandemic era restrictions and just even labor shortages and just coming out of the pandemic and trying to recover, and then competition in general. Carlos's story was actually featured in Alfredo's book that was released earlier this year, which I just happen to have a copy of. Ta-da! It's called The Real Race Revolutionaries: How Minority Entrepreneurship Can Overcome America's Racial and Economic Divides. Alfredo, you explain how entrepreneurship and not activism is the best way for minorities to overcome racial income gaps that persist in this country. Before we get into what I love the subject of this book, Alfredo, can you kind of take a step back and share the story of where this book stems from? Because I think it's such a great story.
Yeah, absolutely, Elaine. It's, so far too, the reception to the book's been really positive. And I'm excited about it because this is a conversation that I think needs to be had. I mean, right now, for example, we have Senator Tim Scott, who's entered the presidential race. And, they brought in Barack Obama to basically say that he really doesn't understand the needs of the Black people, and that really he's just really there to appease the folks on the right and to not make them feel guilty about systemic racism. And I sit there and I thought to myself, wait a minute, didn't we vote for a Black president just a little bit ago? I mean, my goodness, he reached the highest office in this country. I mean, I think, look, are things perfect? Absolutely not. We have a long ways to go. We have a lot to do in terms of racism. Elaine, you and I have had a lot of conversations. I myself have been victim of racism. So I understand that it's still alive, it's still real. But the idea that it's just systemic throughout the entire country is just kind of ludicrous. I mean, when you look at the opportunities that are provided to our small business owners, for example, who are minorities, Black, brown, Asian, immigrants, I mean, it's just really amazing. I mean, that's why I'm really excited to have Carlos come on the show today to talk about that, because this was a big opportunity to have this kind of conversation. And, the book did stem from a testimony that I gave before the House Ways and Means Committee last spring, where I was brought in to talk about how racism actually interrupts the ability for minorities to get ahead. And quite frankly, my conversation was that it was really entrepreneurship and not more government that's needed to really help minorities get ahead and to basically bridge the racial and economic divide. And so obviously, the left did not receive that well. There was a congresswoman from the Virgin Islands who basically called me ignorant and that my rhetoric was troublesome to her. This is what really bothers me. I mean, as a minority, I grew up poor. I grew up picking trash cans with my mom. I mean, I'm sorry, I do understand what it's like to be poor. I do understand what it's like to be a minority. And I do understand what it's like to be a victim of racism. And none of that's really fun and pretty. And it's actually pretty ugly, right? But we have, as a country, come a long ways. And I think my biggest issue with the Democrats is that the conversation is really about focusing on what divides us versus what actually unites us as a country. This morning, for example, I was watching Fox and Friends, and Evita Keane, the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King, was on there, and that was exactly her point: is that we need to focus on those things that actually unite us versus the things that actually divide us. We shouldn't be focused on race and gender and stuff like that, that, identity politics that the left enjoys to talk about, and really, for quite frankly, drives a wedge between folks in this country, and really focus on, what we can do together. And entrepreneurship, I make that point in the book, is really the primary way that minorities have been able to bridge the economic and racial divide. And again, we should do, the government should do less and get out of the way and let small business owners and entrepreneurs do what they do best, which is grow and build and be part of the American dream.
It just seems like, and I don't begin to understand, or have I ever been the victim of racism? So I obviously speak from a different point of view. And you mentioned yourself that you have been the victim of racism. But it seems like kind of what you said, the Democrats seem to highlight the story of the victimhood and almost that soft bigotry instead of highlighting the progress that we as a country have made. And, I'll tell you, it's almost offensive, because when you strip out everything and you just go to the free marketplace, if you're somebody, regardless of who you are, what color you are, and you're providing a service or a product to the marketplace, there's no way. It's not about racism. It's about filling a need in the marketplace. And that's where the success comes from, is filling that need. It's dollars chasing that product that you've invented or created or service or something unique. And I just don't hear the activist side, the Black Lives Matter and groups like that, focusing on those types of successes as if there's some sort of exception to the rule, when they're really not. I mean, you've put statistics out there, talked about the statistics of how many minority entrepreneurs there are out there. What is the number at right now?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the women, for example, actually are now the majority of new businesses, small businesses created, and minority small businesses are actually about 40% now of small business being created. And so entrepreneurship really is the way for folks to get ahead, to be part of the American dream. And we actually, Elaine, we put out that project last year, the Great Opportunity Project. And I love to talk about that for a few minutes here, because that was something that was really focused on exactly what this country was made. Is this really is the Great Opportunity Project, right? Where it's not about equality of outcome, but equality of opportunity, right? And I think that's what I love about this country. And it has afforded me the opportunity to pursue the American dream. And, I think that's what we need to focus on. I think that's what the conversation should be. Yes, we do have to address racism in this country, but we have come a long way. And instead of focusing on all the negative and all the ugliness of it, let's focus on all the positive and where we've come from, and focus on all the wins that we've had so far. Like I said, we voted for a Black president. We have Tim Scott, senator, right, who's running for president of the Republican Party. And so we have really come a long way, and we really should be focusing again on the things that unite us.
Yeah, and I like that. I like that positive message. I really do. I think the American people want to hear more of that, because I think people are really tired of being divided on everything from politics to racial to economic. It's rich versus poor, it's Black versus white, and it's Republican versus Democrat. And if for some reason you don't fit that narrative of whatever bucket you're being put into, then somehow you're not credible and you can't speak for that community that you're coming from. And like I said, it gets to a point where it's almost offensive.
Right.
I find it interesting that we have such a debate about immigration in this country, namely that there are so many people who want to immigrate to our country. And if we were, in fact, a community that was very racist and didn't provide opportunities to minorities, we wouldn't have people lined up at our borders trying to get in. The reality is that millions of people want to come to this country because we do provide opportunities. And I don't care. I don't think they're going to feel triggered as they cross the border because somebody says something that they interpret as racist. They want to work. They want to make money. They want to start businesses.
Yeah, exactly, Jamie. I mean, I don't think the Mexican government has border patrol agents on their side keeping Americans from rushing into Mexico. This is obviously something that all over the world. I mean, we're still viewed as the place where you can actually pursue an opportunity. And I have to tell you, Jamie, I really see, the group that actually appreciates it the most, honestly, are immigrants. I mean, I can't tell you how many immigrant stories, restaurateurs or small business owners I've run into across the country, where they just say, I came here with nothing, and now I own this restaurant, or now I own this dry cleaner, or now I own multiple restaurants, right? They go, if you work really hard in this country, you can actually succeed. You can be something, right? If you work really hard in my country, where let's say they came from Nicaragua or something like that, the government takes it over. And so again, your point is very well taken and very valid, is that people come here for a reason, right? Not because we're a racist country, but we're the country of opportunity. And I think if we keep on pushing that and focus on opportunity and a positive message, I honestly think that racial tensions and relations could actually be improved. Again, I go back to what Avita Keen said this morning, is that if we can only focus on those things that actually unite us versus those things that actually divide us, I think this country is just going to be better off.
Great point, Alfredo. And it's just a great point to take a pause and bring on our next guest this week. It's time for our interview with Carlos Gazitua. Carlos is the president and CEO of Sergio's restaurant in South Florida. He grew up in the family business. Sergio's was his home away from home. After school as a kid, he would help with inventory, washing dishes, and now he's taken over the business. Carlos has over 35 years experience in the restaurant business. He's the third generation running the restaurant and has grown 4 times larger after he took over. Carlos earned his undergraduate degree from Georgetown University and his MBA and law degree from Stetson College of Law. Carlos, welcome to Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone.
Hi, Alfredo. Hi, Elaine. Thank you for having me.
Well, Carlos, thanks again for joining us on our podcast here, Main Street Matters. We're really excited to be able to bring stories like yours to the American public and feature what it's like to be an entrepreneur and all the trials and tribulations that it comes with that. But before we get into that, I just want to talk about your restaurant because it's an awesome restaurant. I've been there before. Amazing
Very
food. Give us a little bit of background about your restaurant, first of all.
Sure. We serve Cuban food, Cuban comfort food down here in Miami, Florida, actually now all over South Florida. And we've been in business for over like 40 years, where my mother came from Cuba with nothing, and basically started a small business as a sandwich shop. Back then, there weren't a lot of Latin, Hispanic women. So we kept the name Sergio's, which if you could say it in Italian, you could say it in English, you could say it in Spanish. And it was really focusing on just doing some really good comfort food, right? Really good Cuban food that the community can enjoy. And it's been 45 years since, and I'm third generation running the business. And it's been a wonderful ride, fruitful, but full of ups and downs and challenges like any small business in America.
Yeah, well, I definitely know it has its challenges. I think when I first met you, probably about 8 years ago, you had no gray, and I'm seeing a little bit of gray on the beard there. So it obviously adds some stress to your life, I'm sure. I had 2 small businesses myself, so I know it's a 24/7 job, and a restaurant especially is a 24/7 job. I got to ask you another question because you were in the news on this. By the way, you've done an amazing job on the marketing. I think I saw you in the Home Shopping Network. Was it
QVC? Yes.
Oh, QVC. Yeah. That's right. QVC. Where were you selling on QVC again?
We were selling croquetas. We sold over 20 million croquetas in our history of Sergio's, and we sold 35,000 in 7 minutes on QVC.
Wow. Oh my gosh!
So wow. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's amazing. I remember seeing it. I was so proud of you doing such a great job on that. But another reason I remember seeing your restaurant in the news is because you went and you took a very interesting path to address the labor shortage that exists in this country, especially in the restaurants. Robots. Tell me about it. You hired you bought a robot, I think, to work your restaurant.
Yeah, that was a time during the pandemic, right, where just employees weren't showing up to work. It was difficult to get them in. Some were scared. Some just weren't coming into the hospitality industry, whether they were working virtual or moving on to different industries. We were having a difficult time. But what was interesting was our governor at that time, and it's still our current governor, DeSantis, really wanted to keep us open. And by keeping us open, we had tourists from all over the United States. I think 1/3 of the United States came to Florida in 1 year. So, we had a dichotomy of we don't have employees, yet we are so busy that the line was out the door, and we were thinking to ourselves, what do we do? So we really got desperate and kind of just brainstormed and said, okay, if the server can stick with the guest, could we get a robot to run the food out? Everyone thought we were crazy, thought I was crazy, but we were able to connect with someone in California that we knew, another CEO, and talked about, could this happen? And they said yes, and it actually happened in Korea. And that's how it started. And we said, bring the robot. They go, you don't want to see it? You don't even want to do a demo? No, just bring it. It doesn't matter, because we got to supply our consumer. And little by little, we were able to show our staff, number one is that they can make more money by not going back and forth to get the food. But two, the consumer really appreciated what we were doing, right? We were turning over the tables. We were getting their food that they wanted. A lot of restaurants were closed certain days because overburden of the staffing issues. And we're really proud of that moment of what we can do. And it's really leaning into tech to show that the restaurant industry, which lags a lot in tech, is that you can still create a really good experience for your guests, but use tech and use automation a little bit to help them.
Yeah. And I think we're going to see more and more automation. I mean, you're seeing kiosks all over now, for example, at McDonald's for ordering, for example. And so I think that's just kind of a natural outgrowth of, the labor wages, the way they are. We're going to see more and more of that, I think. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think tech is naturally going to be progressed throughout our industry that it was not before. Whether, like you said, it's the economics, whether it's people, it's not just economics of wages, right? Because down here in Miami, every market's a little different. Miami, we in the state of Florida passed the $15 minimum wage that was in there, but a lot of people are getting paid $15. It's really the servers. Right now we did a recent study in our restaurants, and our servers, I look at every week of how much they take per hour. And the average server per hour is making between $17 to $19 per hour, plus me paying them $10 an hour. Wow. Right? There's some that are making $25 to $27 an hour, plus another $10. Wow. And we haven't even got to the $15 wage that eventually the server will keep going up as well. And the tip credits, one of the big issues right here in the state of Florida, that they said, hey, I don't think the voters wanted to vote this way in terms of the tip credit. But the minimum wage, yes, but not the tip credit. But that's a big argument between now, the mess between the representatives and on both sides of how this came apart. But it's going to be a big issue where wages are going to be sticky. So prices are not going to come down. But the other issue is virtual working. Now, that's been a big topic for our restaurants and hospitality industry. And that's going to continue to be, I think, a major impact on why automation and IT will stay sticky as well, is because even if you pay someone, they're making $30 an hour, $40 an hour, right, they still rather work virtual. So that's going to be a big issue coming forward.
Yeah, I think COVID really changed people's perspectives of how they wanted to work and where they wanted to work. It's really easy for somebody who's, works an office job as a customer service representative or something like that. Not too easy to work from home when you're working at a restaurant. So I assume the labor issue for you and finding the labor just is still difficult the way it was directly right after we got out of COVID.
Absolutely, that's going to be a sticky issue for years to come, unless they figure out something with immigration or workforce visas or things down the pipeline. Because I don't see. I know Elon Musk is talking about people going back to the office, but I just don't see
Right. Yeah.
it coming back completely. I think there'll still be some kind of hybrid or certain days, and I think that's going to be the negotiations between a lot of businesses and employees.
Yeah, I think that's why in some metros we're seeing 40, 50% occupancy rates in the major metros, and a lot of empty office buildings. So we yet to be seen. Well, I wanted to bring up the robot issue because I really think you're one of the most creative restaurateurs out there, just trying to figure out how to make things survive. You might be the first attorney that actually I can say is creative and has a legal background. So kudos to you for really doing that and the success you've had for 40 years. Now, Elaine, I know you had a couple questions for Carlos as well.
Well, I'll start out with one that's a little bit funny. Did you see a decrease in broken dishes with the robots taking the food out?
That's such a funny question, but it's an interesting question too, right? Because there is a little bit less breakage on the dishes, because we do use the robots to bring some of the dishes. Once the customer is complete, you can turn the robot into a busser to bring it back into the dishwash pit. One of the things that we're working on now is R&D, and is the future will be is could we separate the dishes and the fork and knives with the robot at the table, which would help prevent breakage even more. And that's a big topic on cost, but it's something that, yes, it helped a little bit, absolutely, and I think the future will progress even more on that.
I follow you on Instagram, so I see all your creative marketing, and I saw you recently opened up a new location. So how many locations do you have now?
So we have a total of 13 locations, but we're adding more, and these are called different locations where one of the things that the COVID taught us was to really diversify. We were in the restaurant business prior to COVID. After COVID, we're no longer in the restaurant business. We're in the food business. And that was a different mentality we had going forward. It was like, hey, you know what? We're not going to let government anymore control us, right? Because the number one thing that we saw that government had a tough time controlling was the manufacturing of food. And they said, hey, well, we got to feed someone, so we'll keep them open, but we'll just pick on the restaurants and the hotels, and we'll tell them they got to close. Even though the gas stations are open, right, and they're pumping gas using the same hands to do that, they were telling us, well, no one can open your door because that same germs on your hands, the next person would grab. And then you would say, but wait a minute, across the street, they're doing the exact same thing. So it taught us to be a little bit more open-minded in terms of, okay, how are we going to diversify away from government? And one of the things we did was continue to build our manufacturing plant. We're one of the only restaurateurs that have our own USDA facility. And now we're selling to different hotels our empanadas, our croquetas, and whether we're talking to the Ritz-Carltons as well, to expand our portfolio into these hotels that we know gives us a broader base, and also as well as we're looking at medical as well that we're dealing with, and just really providing more diversification in the food line, as well as airports, concessionaires, in airlines, and arenas as well.
So could we see Sergio's in the grocery store like we see some of the other restaurant labels in? Like I know Olive Garden, I always buy their salad dressing at my grocery store. Are we going to see some Sergio's products there?
That's one of the things actually we're doing right now is R&D is figuring out how we can produce enough for potential grocery stores in the future. So it's definitely something that we have marked as one of our future endeavors.
Well, Sergio, if you ever need some help, let me know, because I used to work at Nestle and Kraft Foods, so we used to run the Stouffer's business, so I'm pretty familiar with that. So let me know if you ever need help on that. But I can't wait to see that, because right now I have to tell you, talking about all this food, I haven't had lunch. I am starving, so I wish I could get a hold of some Sergio's croquetas right now. But going back to one thing though that you said, in terms of the government aspect of it, and actually, I think a really important thing that all small business owners would be interested in talking about is kind of redefining what you're about and who you are. Basically, it's not, you said, I think you're not in the restaurant business, you're in the food business. I always said that Amazon, for example, Bezos really had it right. He realized he wasn't in, the book business or things like that. He was literally in the transportation and distribution business. And I think once he understood that, he understood the model, and obviously he made the mega store or the mega online presence that it is right now. But talk to me a little bit more about how that has really kind of changed everything now that you've really redefined that you're really a food business.
The mentality of that everyone is a potential customer, depending on your strategic vision, gives you a little bit more of a diversification idea, and also an opportunity to move up people in your staff. One of the things that we did was moving up our current managers to maybe be more of a district manager for the wholesale division, or look at we were able to move into a catering manager, that someone that maybe was a manager, now she moves up. Now she's responsible for all the catering division, the medical side. So opportunities, that we couldn't do before because we're still fishing in the same pond and doing the same competition as everyone else. Right. Now they're like, wait a minute, how are they paying them so much more? How are they so successful when I'm doing the same thing? Well, you're not doing the same thing. We're investing on the back end on the opportunities that we can fish from different ponds. Gives me more opportunity to pay my employees more and to raise them up into different opportunities. And I think that's what hopefully keeps them in line with our values, our culture, our company long term, that they can be. We had a really cool event last month where we celebrated our employees with T-shirts that were 10, 20, and 30 years into the company. And we're proud to say that we had over 10 employees over 30 years. We had about 30 employees over 20 years, right? 20 to 30 years.
That's fantastic.
And from 10 to 20, we had another 50 employees. So it just shows you people that want to stay in the company is a good sign, right? It's a good testing mark for your company to see, are you doing the right things, and are you continue to give opportunities?
Wow. And Carlos, this is in an industry, correct me if I'm wrong though, the turnover is about 9 months. Isn't that correct? Employee turnover?
Yeah, turnover in our industry is close to 90% in our overall industry.
I mean, that's incredible. I mean, congratulations. It really does speak volumes. What did your parents think, by the way? I mean, you said they came here from Cuba pretty much with not much in their pockets, and now they see this great success that Sergio's is that you have really helped create. I mean, first of all, they must be so proud of you. But what have they said?
I mean, she's proud, and my grandmother's no longer with us, but it was something that I think they both would be proud of. My mom is obviously proud of what we're doing, and she's, grounded to know that we're lucky, we're blessed that in the hospitality industry, we serve others. So white collar, blue collar, it doesn't matter. We're grounded to our feet. Every day we're a transactional business. This is not a business that we have a SaaS model all the time, even though I'm getting to that, to really make sure that you're in tune with your guests and with your community. And so being grounded in her, seeing the success we have, and people are really appreciating our stories, it is critical for her success and her dream that she wanted was always selling great Cuban comfort food. Now the question is do people accept it, right? Were you able to create a niche? Were you able to tell that story of why people would enjoy your food versus everything else? Because at the end of the day, small businesses is the toughest, most competitive environment you can be in, right? Because you don't have as much purchasing power as the bigger companies, right? You're most likely affected more due to regulations, right, than big business, because you don't have as much attorneys on staff. You don't have as much accountants on staff. You don't know how to do the depreciation and accounting. So you really need to have a lot of hats on. And thank God, I'm part of the company, so I have a lawyer hat, I have my MBA hat on. I feel like I change hats every few hours to deal with these issues. The feeling, and I think every small business has the same. That's why we got to keep it easier and simpler for them. But I think her seeing the successes of me being able to outreach to other vendors like HMS Host. HMS Host does every Starbucks in the United States, and they're one of our partners. And being able to partner with them and say, hey, Cuban food is great. Cuban food could be good for the American community. The American community is the one that benefits because they get different flavors, different profiles, and they show acceptance to the Hispanic culture is a great thing for everyone.
Yeah, that's terrific. Elaine?
Well, Carlos, what are some of the challenges? I mean, we talked to you a lot during the pandemic, and you had great feedback for us on the Paycheck Protection Program. But as we've come out of the pandemic, what are some of your biggest challenges that you feel like you're facing? I know you mentioned the minimum wage with the tip credit, but what are some of the areas that you're really focused on from a policy perspective?
I think one of the first things that most small businesses are struggling right now, especially the restaurateurs, is inflation. That has been probably one of the worst ways of eating any profit margins into our business. One of the things that it's interesting when you look at it, you say, hey, my sales might be up, right? Because you can increase price, but your guest traffic is down because less people are coming in, because as prices go up, guess what happens? People start saying, well, I can't go as often, right? And then when you talk to your staff and your managers, because we profit share with our managers and our teams as part of our company, it's part of our values is profit sharing too, so they know that when we win, they win. When we lose, we all lose together, right? They see the value of keeping long-term this business. They're all like, I don't get it, Carlos. How do we have record sales and yet lose money that month? How is that possible? And it was because the inflation kept going up so fast that we could not keep up with the pricing. In fact, a lot of restaurateurs took the prices out of their menus locally. And so it's a lot of confusion for the guests. I think inflation is probably one of our biggest obstacles for the restaurant industry. Is how do we calm that down? And I think it will eventually happen, but we got to stop printing. We got to create a balanced budget. We got to have a roadmap to success here, like any business, to try to control these expenses. Because if not, we're just going to keep printing. We're losing the value of the purchasing power of all these small businesses. And it's not just small businesses, it's actually the consumer as well, right? Yeah. People can get paid more, but if they can't afford their house or they can't afford to move up, it's the biggest trick in the game, right? It's to say, hey, you got paid more. Great, I got paid more, but I can't afford to sell my house and move on somewhere else. And I think that's what every American is feeling right now in all of America. And so they just don't like the current economic condition that everyone's facing.
Did you say that your competitors actually took the pricing off their menus?
Some restaurateurs did, yeah. Like locally that we have around there, they just took it off. And I'll tell you right now, on my coffee shops, I don't even have on the side of our coffee shop bakery, I don't even have most of them, I don't even have a menu for the coffee and pastries, because it was going so crazy. We just said, look, we'll do that in 3-4 months. Our prices are pretty attractive anyways, so we don't get that much pushback. But it was like, we can't just keep printing menus every 2 or 3 weeks. We'd rather just hold. And we had a strategic hold where we lost money several months on purpose, because we said, hey, look, we can keep increasing like everyone else. Or do we just eat it and then wait 3 or 4 months from now and then still stay a little lower than our competition and move on? But not everyone has the luxury to do that. You can't lose $70,000 a month and say, okay, where are you going to come up with that money? And so that's a strategic play that our family did for our community that they'll never know. They'll never know that we lost $70,000 in certain months to try to help the community so we can stay attractive as a strategic game, and that in the future, we're still a little lower than everyone else. And now we're benefiting a little bit more than the other consumer. Because at the end of the day, that's the toughest thing for small businesses is, hey, don't worry, just increase price.
So let me get this straight. You didn't increase your prices on purpose, and you on purpose took a $70,000 a month loss to help your community.
Yeah, because as groceries swung up and they were doing their ticker prices.
I just don't think you would ever see larger companies do something like that for their communities. I just don't think they would. Do your employees know that you did that?
No, a lot of our employees, well, our managers do, because our managers saw the lost profit, even though we still gave them bonuses, even regardless of that. just to show them our good faith effort to say, hey, we understand this wasn't your fault always to increase pricing, but we have to do it in order to stay long term in as a location to be in for the local community. So while we still gave them bonuses, we had to eat it, because at the end of the day, we have to think long term. Just like the Japanese think long term and people think long term is, hey, how do you think that you're going to be here for another 30, 45 years? And so we said, let's do it now. I will answer, Elaine. Big CEOs in big corporate America can't do that, right? Or won't do that, because they're worried about the stock price every 3 months, 4 months. They really don't care about the consumer. They're looking about their investors and strategically saying, hey, this is a public company. We have to keep our stock price at a certain price and our earnings. We, as a strategic family, we do have some private investors in some of our locations. We said, look, this is strategically is the best long-term strategy for our community, for our business, for our consumer, so that long-term we'll make it back in the future.
I mean, I think that's fantastic. I always encourage our small business owners to share stories with their employees so that they understand, just because you open a business, you're not a multimillionaire. And there are struggles. I mean, my family owned a Goodyear tire store, and, sometimes on Thursday night, the day before payday, it was a little stressful in our household trying to figure out how we were going to meet payroll. And those stressful nights kept us up at night because we were worried about our employees. We were worried about making sure they had paychecks to take care of their families. And it's a big burden to carry on your shoulders, but that's your family of employees.
Absolutely. You're a mother, you're a father figure for your employees, because how you go, they go, right? That is the tough part about being a small business, is that your decisions impact your 300-400 employees. And by the way, their problems are your problems. When they have a problem, they come to us, whether it's a loan, whether it's, hey, help me with this crisis. That's why you're there. So many times you're there as almost a counselor, as a therapist, as a father figure to help them during the crisis. And many times you're a banker too. Unfortunately, not a lot of small businesses do that, but many times we have no choice because we want them long-term. And I think that's why we have people long-term in our companies, because they can have direct interaction with ownership that cares and sees them as their value. We're not Apple that can pay all this money in stocks, but what we can do is we can care.
That's a great way to put it. We can care.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I was just thinking as he was telling that story, because I had a small business myself, Carlos, you remember, in consulting. So I didn't have 300 or 400. I had like 3 or 4 people. But I do remember that every time there was a good news actually on their end. For example, one of my employees came and said, "Hey, I'm engaged now. I'm getting married." I'm like, "Hey, that's great." I'm thinking to myself, I'm probably gonna have to help pay for that somehow. And then, come later and it's like, "Hey, I'm pregnant," and I'm sitting there thinking, "Oh my gosh, now I'm going to have to worry about another kid," and it literally became so personal to me that everything that impacted them impacted me, and that, I really had their livelihood in my hands. And I really, it did keep me up, like Elaine said, late at night. And that's something that I don't think the American public really understands about small businesses.
We're like little stars in the community, right? Small businesses. So it doesn't. Yeah. You don't see the power with one star, but once you look up on Montana and you're up there in big sky and you see all these stars, right, then you realize the power and the magnitude of what it is and what small business can be for the community. That's why they are the heart of the community. They are the ones we need to protect, and the ones we need to continue to provide access to capital, no-show regulations, and continue to flourish and provide a pathway for success, because they hire the minorities. They take care of your community. They stay open 24/7. They're constantly working. They have a lot of stress.
Yeah. Hey, Carlos, I know we're running out of time, but in the book you talk about entrepreneurship, for example, and how entrepreneurship really is the path for minorities to really have part of the American dream and the opportunity that comes with it. Do you want to spend just a few minutes talking about that?
Sure. I mean, for me, the American dream is is to have your independence and your freedom, right? That's what America is all about, freedom and independence. And there's nothing better and more freer than being an entrepreneur. You know, yes, you're in an island kind of many ways, developing your concept, creating your niche. But again, you're that father figure. You're the one that you can create that freedom for your employees, create that freedom for your family, right? You can do generational wealth, right? By establishing a business and giving it to your kids and your kids. So you're the full independence. And there's nothing more American, you know, just like American pie is as entrepreneurship. And the question is do we want to continue to cultivate that in America? Do we want to continue to feed that culture? Because I will tell you what, Alfredo, culture is caught. It's not taught, meaning that you have to see it and you have to create that culture for people to live it. And if you don't embrace that, and if you don't encourage that from education, from high school to college and on, and you don't encourage that entrepreneurship in America, you can do anything you want, and the dreams can come true. You lose it, and when we lose that innovation, that entrepreneurship, is when America won't be where it could be, and where it should be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. For our listeners, if you could tell us your website so that anybody who visits Florida knows where to go.
Well, it's easy. Sergio's, SERGIOS.com. So www.sergios.com. Cuban food down here in South Florida. And love to have you. And we welcome everyone to enjoy some good old-fashioned Cuban food.
It is awesome food. It is awesome food. My mouth's watering right now. So...
Well, Carlos, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Tell us your real American story and the success of your business, and we wish you luck in the future. Thank you so much again for listening to us and joining our new show, Main Street Matters, America's Small Business Megaphone. And for those of you listening out there, you can subscribe to our podcast at salempodcast.com or anywhere you get your podcast from. Thank you very much.